The Battle of Lang Son was fought during the Sino-Vietnamese War. Days after the Chinese People's Liberation Army advanced 15 to 20 kilometers deep into the northern provinces of Vietnam. The fighting occurred primarily at the city of Lang Son, a few kilometers from the Sino-Vietnamese border. Although the Chinese eventually occupied Lang Son and its nearby vicinities during the battle, it proved during that time that the Chinese regular units invading northern Vietnam are no match against militia and irregular Vietnamese units. Tenaciously harassing the Chinese advanced southwards towards Hanoi, Vietnam's capital city, and eventually took the Chinese forces days to occupy the city and dislodge its defenders. After capturing the northern heights above Lang Son, the Chinese surrounded and paused in front of the city, in order to lure the Vietnamese into reinforcing it with units from Cambodia. This had been the main strategic ploy in the Chinese war plan, as Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping did not want to risk an escalation potentially involving the Soviet Union. The Vietnam People's Army High Command, after a tip-off from Soviet satellite intelligence, was able to see through the trap, however, and committed reserves only to Hanoi. Once this became clear to the PLA, the war was practically over. An assault was still mounted, but the Vietnamese only committed one VPA regiment defending the city. After 3 days of bloody house-to-house fighting, Lang Son fell on the 6th of March. The PLA then took the southern heights above Lang Son background, as part of the punitive expedition against Vietnam for the occupation of the pro-Chinese Democratic Campuchia. Chinese forces entered northern Vietnam and advanced quickly about 15 to 20 kilometers into Vietnam, with fighting mainly occurring in the provinces of Cao Biang, Lao Cai and Lang Son. The Vietnamese avoided mobilizing their regular divisions into the fight, using most of them for the defense of Hanoi. The Vietnamese forces tried to avoid direct combat, and often used guerrilla tactics to harass the Chinese forces advancing southwards. To make this work for the Vietnamese, they had to use their mountainous terrain to their advantage, which was a serious handicap for the Chinese trying to assault and destroy several Vietnamese irregular units. Preparations. The PLA General Staff Department placed the primary responsibility of capturing Lang Son on the 55th Army from the Guangzhou Military Region and assigned the 54th and 43rd Armies from the Wuhan Military Region in supporting roles. Each of these armies of about 43,000 men was organized into 3 infantry divisions, 1 artillery regiment, and 1 anti-aircraft regiment. In addition, 3 more regiments were also mobilized from the Chengdu Military Region, designated as Unit 56,037, Unit 56,039, and Unit 56,229. The total strength for Chinese forces numbered about 130,000. The Chinese planned to launch their assault along all of the 5 roads that led to Lang Son from the north, east, and south, filling each of the directions with at least 2 or 3 divisions. From the border between markers 15 and 20, the 55th Army would advance toward the town of Thong Thang, while the 43rd would cross the border between markers 32 and 45, sweeping through Khai Ma before attacking Loc Bin, which was 10 kilometers to the southwest of Lang Son, then moving northwest against the provincial capital via Highway 4B. The 54th Army would initially play its role as a reserve. Meanwhile, the Vietnamese defense in Lang Son was assigned to the 3rd Division, a veteran division of the VPA that had participated extensively during the Vietnam War. The division had about 9,950 men, assisted by several local force battalions from Lang Son City and Van Lang and Cao Loc districts, as well as the 166th Artillery Regiment and the 272nd Anti-Aircraft Regiment sent from the 1st Military Region. The total Vietnamese strength was approximately 13,000 men, meaning that they were outnumbered 10 to 1. Three other divisions, the 327th, 337th, and 338th, stayed further behind the front lines to serve as reserve units. To consolidate their defensive positions, the Vietnamese managed to build nearly 20,000 field fortifications, which were intensively camouflaged and supported by numerous minefields and obstacles. Battle. Taking out the defense around Thong Thang. The initial attacks was marked by Chinese artillery fire into Lang Son at 500 on the 17th of February. The Chinese had paved way for their offensive throughout the night before by infiltrating the Vietnamese territory, cutting telephone lines and conducting sabotages. Waves of PLA troops from the 55th Army quickly overwhelmed Hill 386, a position situated 1.5 kilometers south of the border, killing 118 Vietnamese. Though pockets of resistance were continued near the Friendship Pass and in Thong Thang, most of the Vietnamese defense was by then undertaken by the VPA 12th Regiment southerly at the hamlet of Tham Mo and its vicinity. After taking Hill 386, the PLA used the 163rd Division to capture Thong Thang and strike Vietnamese positions on the Tham Mo line. The attack was backed by small groups of tanks arriving on Highway 4A. Fighting over the Tham Mo area raged until the 22nd of February, as Chinese charges in mass formations had been continuously repulsed with heavy casualties. The Chinese Field Command had to switch their tactics, using small unit attacks to flank Vietnamese positions instead of frontal attacks by human waves. The change resulted in the fall of Tham Mo to the hands of the PLA 163rd Division at 2000. Similarly, Chinese massed attacks to the east of Tham Mo and Tham Luang, which had started from the 17th of February, were stiffly contained by the defenders. On the 18th of February, a Vietnamese counter-attack launched by the VPA 2nd Regiment drove PLA units back to their assembled positions on hills 409, 611, and 675. This pattern was repeated on the following days. On the 23rd of February, the PLA stormed Phay Mon, a position to the east of Tham Luang, using 6 waves of attacks, of which all were rebuffed. Chinese forces had to launch 12 more charges throughout the day to finally break through Tham Luang, suffering over 1,000 killed. At Con Coang, a village in the rear of Hill 339, the Vietnamese 63rd Company had fended off the assault of an unevenly outnumbering Chinese force on the 17th of February after virtually wiping out an enemy battalion, approaching and occupying Lang Son from 24 to the 26th of February. Fighting downscaled, as the PLA was holding back and regrouping. 2 fresh Chinese divisions from the 54th Army, the 160th and 161st, moved up to spearhead the attacks, with the 55th Army behind preparing to advance toward Lang Son. In meantime, the VPA 3rd Division had pulled out their troops from Tham Mo to establish a new defensive perimeter between Si Chu and Hill 417, on the western side of Highway 4A near Tham Luang, in order to keep the highway blocked, as well as to stand up to Chinese pressure from Tham Luang. On the 24th of February, the VPA 1st Military Region Command officially established the Lang Son Front, placing it under the leadership of Major General Hoang Then. At 6:05 on the 27th of February, Chinese forces renewed their offensive in Lang Son with a 4-pronged attack on Hill 417, Ka Ma Son, Pa Vai Son, and Ka Khao Son, giving friendly units time to encircle Lang Son from the southeast and southwest. Ka Ma Son, a strategic 800-meter height situated 4 kilometers west-northwest of Lang Son that virtually obstructed all key roads near the town, fell to a Chinese unit at about 1400. Chinese control over Ka Ma Son made Vietnamese defense from Si Chu to Hill 417 exposed to enemy's sight. as well as threatened VPA 12th Regiment's positions near Choc Vo. However, the Vietnamese reacted promptly, retreating from the COC Chu Hill 417 defensive line to a group of positions between Quan Ha and Kia Kut O Kang, thus blocking the highway access to Lang Son once again. The VPA command also reinforced their battered 12th Regiment by the 42nd Regiment, 327th Division, sending it to Kentucky Lua, which was about 1 kilometer north of Lang Son, to face off the approaching PLA 43rd Army. Yet the remainder of the VPA 327th Division were still stationed further to the south at Kai Lang to prevent any possible deeper Chinese intrusions. Other regular reserves, including 3 divisions of the 1st Corps, were also assembled south of the Kentucky Kung River to protect Hanoi, leaving the task of defending Lang Son City to the 3rd Division and the 42nd Regiment alone. From the 28th of February to the 4th of March, a series of heavy engagements occurred to the north of Lang Son as the Chinese tried to push toward the city. As the Chinese attacked, they also managed to take control over all the roads connecting with Lang Son, thus employing Mao Zedong's strategy of the countryside surrounding the city, in order to avoid the Vietnamese trap of a second Verdun. Though seriously weakened, the Vietnamese 3rd Division had not given up contesting Chinese troops along Highway 1B, with battalions and companies relentlessly defending Hills 607 and 649. On the 2nd of March, a Chinese column on the highway was ambushed by a Vietnamese battalion. During the period of 2 to 10 March, a company of the Chinese Unit 56,037 lost 1/3 of its men as it managed to hold a hill near Ban Lan against successive Vietnamese assaults. While the battle for Lang Son was taking its course, Vietnamese forces also carried out raids against Chinese border towns of Malipo and Ninh Minh, but caused no significant losses. From the south and the east of Lang Son, it took the PLA 43rd Army 2.5 weeks from the 17th of February to reach the city. Its 127th Division marched from Ba Sun between border markers 32 and 33 to Highway 1A at Khao Lok. The itinerary, which took the Chinese 10 days just to overcome the distance of 5 kilometers from the border to Ban Xam due to drastic interceptions by the VPA 141st Regiment. To the south of Lang Son, the PLA 129th Division thrust to Loc Bin after crossing the border at Kai Ma. It took the Chinese 11 days to overrun Loc Bin, which was still 22 kilometers away from Lang Son. Chinese forces kept using mass formation attacks to suppress the strong Vietnamese resistance on these directions. By the 2nd of March, Chinese forces had captured most of the hills around Lang Son, having the city virtually besieged. At Khan Khe, they encountered elements of the VPA 337th Division, which had been sent to hold off Chinese movement against Lang Son in the area. On the 3rd of March, the Chinese launched their final assault on Lang Son. Contemporarily, the VPA 3rd Division, with the 42nd Regiment presumably following, had been ordered to withdraw from the city and incorporated into the newly founded 5th Corps, which consisted of the 3rd, 327th, 337th, 338th, and 347th Divisions, serving the purpose of future operations. The 12th Regiment, which had been cut off from the rest of the 3rd Division, was assigned to continue defending their enclaved positions along Highway 1B. Chinese forces finally advanced across the Kentucky Kung River at Phaeng Phuc along a line through the hills west of Highway 1B, swiftly crippling the defense on Me Mai Hill on their way before capturing the Mai Pha airfield and Hill 391 on the southeast on the 4th of March. On the 5th of March, the PLA 127th and 129th Divisions eventually entered Lang Son City, withdrawal after Lang Son was secured. Fighting still went on in Luc Bin and Mong Kai. On 5 March, the Chinese government announced the withdrawal of troops from Vietnam. During their withdrawal, Chinese forces had destroyed the bridge south of Lang Son. Vietnamese units in Lang Son, though badly mauled after previous clashes, still continued their fight against withdrawing Chinese troops. The VPA 327th, 337th, and 338th Divisions, which had originally been positioned south of the front line near Kailang to prevent a possible Chinese breakthrough, were finally committed to the battle for a counter-attack. The 337th and 338th pursued and attacked Chinese forces as they were pulling back and returning to Chinese territory across Gai Ma. Aftermath similar to that of the whole war. The casualties figures of both sides in the battle for Lang Son are controversial. While Vietnamese sources claim to have put 19,000 Chinese troops out of action, an after-battle report from the PLA 55th Army only admitted 1,271 killed and 3,779 wounded for the Chinese side in clashes around Thong Thang and Lang Son. The Chinese also put the number of Vietnamese casualties during the battle at 10,401. Even though the PLA claimed to have crushed several of the Vietnamese regular units, the reality was that Chinese troops engaged primarily border guard and regional Vietnamese militia units, which had clearly outperformed regular Chinese units. Chinese execution of their campaign has proved both ineffective and inefficient, as PLA's outdated tactics did not translate into rapid advance, and its numerous casualties were exchanged for undeservedly small gains. Despite their heavy losses from the battles in Vietnamese border provinces, the Chinese declared that the road to Hanoi was now open, and, believing that victory was already theirs, they withdrew from Vietnam back towards the Sino-Vietnamese border, marking the conclusion of the war.